Welcome to another episode of Battlefield 4 Hardcore Meta, a series covering all Battlefield 4 primary and sidearm weapons in a specifically hardcore context. This episode is going to cover all of the remaining PDWs I've yet to cover in BF4. The first PDW episode covered what could be described as the baseline PDWs that don't specialize for any particular playstyle other than just being solid PDWs. So you could say the opposite holds true for what remains. The PDWs I'll be going over in this episode specialize in some way or provide a unique playstyle. I want to go over the PDW subtypes real quick, and the order in which we'll be covering them. First, we'll go over the heavy hitter PDWs, which are the high damage per shot PDWs. After that, we'll be covering the precision PDWs, which have excellent accuracy and ammo reliability. Following that, the bullet hose PDWs, arguably the most stereotypical type of PDW. Then the intermediate laser beam PDWs, which fire smaller caliber rounds at a high cyclic rate, giving them both accuracy and ease of use, and range versatility not found among any other type of PDW. And finally, I want to cover the integrally suppressed PDWs, which combine the stealth benefits of a suppressor as well as the accuracy benefits that come with a heavy barrel at the same time. Let's go over all of the unlock requirements for the PDWs covered in this video. You will have the Groza 4 unlocked by default. 6 of the PDWs are unlocked via simply earning score with any PDW. The PP2000, UMP45, CBJ-MS, PDW-R, CZ3A1, and finally the JS2 are all unlocked this way. With 48,000 PDW score, you will have gotten the entirety of this collection. The rest require you to complete specific assignments. The P90 is unlocked by reaching the end of BF4's single-player campaign and choosing to give the C4 to Hannah. The rest of the assignments require you to be at least rank 10 before you can start them. The UMP9 requires you to complete a series of assignments in order. Engineer Basic, which requires 7 kills with any carbine and do 16 repairs. Veteran requires you to get 8 kills with any carbine and to do 17 repairs. The final assignment, Expert, requires you to get 10 carbine ribbons, 50 repair tool ribbons, and 200 kills with any carbine. The last assignment makes the bulk of this, but assuming the assignments are done at perfect efficiency, this translates to a total of at least 215 carbine kills and 433 repairs. The repairs will likely take you longer to get on the last assignment in the set, so I suggest focusing on getting those. In general, not a difficult assignment at all, just a time-consuming one. For the MP7, you will need 3 anti-vehicle ribbons, each of which requires you to destroy 2 enemy vehicles during a single match, and to destroy at least 1 air vehicle with a Stinger or Igla anti-air launcher. The former largely just requires persistence, but the latter can be frustrating, since it requires at least 1 targeted air vehicle to poorly manage its countermeasures. That said, it can be a little easier to achieve if you focus on the less maneuverable transport helicopters and use the Igla due to its faster moving missile. As for the AS Val, you will need to spend at least 10 minutes in helicopters and do 10 squad repairs, a largely trivial assignment. For the SR2, you will need to destroy 20 enemy watercraft. This can be time consuming, but can be achieved more easily if you strategize. Using an RCB against rib boats is likely to make the process less time consuming. Now that the unlock requirements have been gone over, I want to say that I have a default suggested build for PDWs that I'd like to state up front. This isn't to say there aren't situations where you shouldn't use this build, and I will go over those exceptions over the course of this video, but most of the time you should select the following build for PDWs: heavy barrel, ergo/vertical grip, laser sight, and one-time sight. My reasoning is simple. The heavy barrel halves starting spread and lowers bloom, which is something PDWs strongly benefit from, as their initial spread is in general the worst among BF4 primary weapons. The grip and laser sight suggestion, on the other hand, is more about maximizing the primary benefit of using PDWs in the first place: excellent hipfire performance. Every PDW, even the PDWs with the lowest damage per second, have technically better hipfire performance than any of the carbines, including the very rapid MTAR. The one-time sight is mostly explanatory. PDWs don't tend to perform particularly well at longer ranges, so an improved zoom is not necessary. But on top of that, selecting a sight with a higher zoom sacrifices PDW's faster ADS move speed, which is not a worthwhile trade-off. Let's take a look at the stats of the PDWs, starting with the two heavy hitters, the UMP-45 and the PDW-R. Both have higher damage per shot than other PDWs, with the PDW-R matching the carbine's damage model and the UMP-45 having its own unique damage model. Starting with the PDW-R's model, you can get a 3-shot kill anywhere to the body out to 20 meters. Out to 46 meters, you can achieve a 4-shot kill anywhere to the body. One headshot and a shot anywhere to the body, you can get a kill out to 29 meters. This is extended to 31 meters if you get a headshot and an unarmored chest shot. The UMP-45 actually does even more damage per shot at ranges closer than 50 meters. Out to 8 meters, 2 unarmored chest shots results in a kill, and with a single headshot, the UMP-45 achieves a kill out to 13 meters. With 3 shots anywhere to the body, the UMP achieves a kill out to 32 meters and a 4-shot kill out to 47 meters. With a headshot and shot anywhere else, the UMP-45 can get a kill out to 37 meters. Both heavy-hitting PDWs share the same minimum damage. With either the UMP-45 and PDW-R, for as long as the bullet is still flying, you can achieve a 2-shot kill with 2 headshots. Further, with 5 shots, you get a kill anywhere to the body, and if at least 3 unarmored chest shots are achieved, this is lowered to a 4-shot kill. If 1 headshot is achieved, this is lowered to a 3-shot kill. The UMP-45 is the hardest hitting per shot PDW available in BF4. However, keep in mind with the PDW-R between 19 and 29 meters, the standard PDW's damage model actually beats the carbines, and this does affect hits needed to get a kill. As a result, this affects the PDW-R negatively in performance in a few spots within this range. The PDW-R's hits to kill over range superiority over other PDWs comes in specifically at ranges beyond 29 meters. Fortunately, the PDW-R can somewhat take advantage of this improved damage at range, as it has a fairly tame recoil. It does share the carbine's slightly worse recoil reset, but this has only a moderate overall effect on controllability. While on the other hand, the UMP-45 suffers from noticeably more steep upward recoil values and first shot recoil. This means the PDW-R is simply a more intuitive weapon to keep on target, especially for shorter bursts. That said, the UMP-45 has a fairly precise recoil pattern in terms of horizontal recoil. Another aspect of note for the PDW-R is its overall hipfire performance, which is rock solid and very consistent. The UMP-45 can't match this outside of times when you melt targets with lucky headshots within the 1-shot headshot range. Other than close range damage per shot, the UMP-45 has excellent overall ammo reliability, primarily stemming from its fantastic reload times. This allows it to stay at the ready for combat consistently, which in comparison, the PDW-R can potentially struggle with, especially if you empty its magazine and need to do an empty reload. The UMP technically has lower explicit shots per magazine, which can affect versatility, but with its increased damage in close range, this largely evens out. The biggest weakness of the UMP-45 is largely tied between its slow cyclic rate and muzzle velocity. Both of these factors contribute to a weapon that is harder to use and requires experience to compensate for, making the UMP-45 reward more dedicated marksman players that can adapt to these restrictions. This also ends up meaning the UMP-45 is more rewarding with more methodical and careful players who like to flank rather than take a direct and aggressive path. The PDW-R ends up being more middle of the road in terms of its RPM, and its velocity ends up actually being on the somewhat high end of things as far as PDWs go, which makes it an easier weapon to use at longer ranges and in more aggressive contexts. One other note is the UMP-45's deploy time is disappointing, whereas the PDW-R has a more conventional PDW deploy time. If you find yourself juggling your equipment a lot, the PDW-R is the safer choice. Otherwise, most of the other stats for these two PDWs are not significantly good or bad enough to talk about. As for build, I suggest my previously mentioned default build for the heavy hitters. You will want to run with a sidearm that complements the tactics of each. So for the PDW-R to match its intuitive nature and help cover for its mediocre ammo reliability, I suggest a P226 or an M9. For the UMP-45, due to its poor velocity but excellent ammo reliability, you might want to consider a mare's leg for longer range. If you already have a rocket launcher capable of long range, then a sidearm with perhaps some stealth flanking utility is more in order, like a Deagle 44 BF4 or M1911 and attaching a suppressor. In terms of tactics and use cases, these are PDWs best used at typical PDW ranges, close range. Due to their generally higher damage per shot and slower RPM, additional precision from the user is necessary to take the most advantage of them. But they do make up for that higher marksmanship requirement with generally more range versatility than a typical PDW, and with additional benefits unique to each. The PDW-R leans a bit more into hipfire, allowing you to play more aggressively, and the UMP-45 rewards headshots within close range with extremely fast kill times. So ADS stocking frequently will generally be in order to fully take advantage of that. Both are generally accurate enough that long bursts of fire are suggested over short or micro bursts. The PDW-R and UMP-45 are most at home in medium-ranged maps and favor direct attacks rather than defensive or flanking styles. The PDW-R will generally handle long range better than the UMP-45 as well, but it's still outclassed by carbines for such a task. Pick these weapons when you want range flexibility but still want access to the hipfire that the PDWs have. The next set of PDWs I want to cover in terms of stats are the precision PDWs. This includes the UMP-45's lower caliber brother, the UMP-9, and the two large magazine PDWs, the CBJ-MS and PP2000. These PDWs generally combine top-of-the-line ammo reliability with very strong controllability for middle and even longer-ranged shooting. These are also the first PDWs I'm talking about in this video that utilize the standard damage model. This is the same damage model I already talked about in my first episode covering the MX4 and MPX. And it applies to both of these precision PDWs as well as the bullet hose PDWs I'll talk about after. Instead of repeating all of the damage values again, I'll show the values briefly on screen. Feel free to pause the video if you want to study it. Moving on, the main drawback of these three is that as far as PDWs go, they have the weakest hipfire performance. This is primarily due to their slow RPM. They still perform better than any and all other full automatic weapons, however, as they still benefit significantly from the PDW hipfire cone. Still, this is a major trade-off, as PDWs largely base their utility in performing effectively from the hip. These PDWs make it up elsewhere. Starting with the UMP-9, the strongest stat of this PDW is its fast reload times, something it inherits from its bigger brother. This enables the UMP-9 to stay up basically perpetually when it actually counts, and can enable some excellent streaks if you approach threats cautiously with it to mitigate the slow time to kill. The other PDW's reload times are a tad more mediocre. Instead, they favor simply having larger magazines, allowing you to handle multiple threats in any combat scenario even more effectively. However, with the price where ammo management does become a bigger concern due to magazine loss from each reload, and the downtime from an individual reload being more risky. Overall though, the ammo reliability of these three PDWs is some of the best in class, and spending time in close quarters heightens the value of this particular stat. They are often disregarded in favor of faster firing options in core because of the slow TTK. But in hardcore, since kill times are shorter, these three PDWs often play quite well and enable some long-range combat PDWs are usually not capable of due to low recoil and bloom stats. The PP2000 ends up being the most precise PDW in BF4 with its combined stats. Landing shots at longer ranges, however, will often require a good velocity. Fortunately, these PDWs are fairly strong in this regard. In fact, the CBJ has the best-in-class velocity of PDWs, and even beats out about 2/3 of the carbines on this metric. The PP2000 is also no slouch, though the UMP-9 does lean a bit more in the direction of mediocrity. One other stat that bears mentioning, the PP2000 has the unique perk of having the fastest available deploy time for a PDW. So if you find yourself juggling weapons or equipment or deal with verticality, the PP2000 will perform very well. Outside of these stats, the precision PDWs don't impress or disappoint. In general, these PDWs are pretty much the poster boys of the default build. That said, the PP2000 gets the asterisk that a 3.4 times or even 4 times scope can function very well. Just know that you are giving up the fast move speed when aimed down sights by equipping such optics. As for tactics, you can generally feel a bit more safe in close quarters while on the front lines with the UMP-9 compared to the other two, since its reload is significantly faster. While the others can get by in close range for the most part, they benefit by a little bit less aggression, so you aren't caught with one of their somewhat longer reloads, though you will be better capable of taking down multiple targets in a single encounter. In all cases, due to their accuracy and slow time to kill otherwise, aiming for the head is generally advisable instead of center of mass. In general, you want to use these while flanking the enemy. Their hipfire makes it a waste of time to use them defensively, and their slower time to kill can make them ineffective fighting on the front line. Push forward, but try to get the jump on your opponents by being less predictable in your routes. Fortunately, these are guns that are mostly suitable for almost any map due to their range flexibility, though selecting a SRA for rocket sniping can't hurt for very long ranges. As for sidearms to pair with these, since their ammo reliability is generally strong, and they will also outperform most sidearms at close and middle range, you might as well pick a sidearm that performs a special utility. In particular, a suppressed sidearm can help you get an initial flank on your enemies to then take full advantage of with your primary. I generally use the M1911 or Deagle 44 for this utility role. Going in the opposite direction of the precision PDWs are the bullet hose PDWs, the CZ3A1, JS2, and SR2. These PDWs are what to use in very close range situations on the front lines, where you want to take your opponents down as quickly as possible so you can make a beeline to an objective with confidence. The primary stat that defines these PDWs is their RPM mixed with the standard damage per shot. The CZ3A1 is the fastest firing PDW in the game at 1000 RPM, and the SR2 and JS2 lie just under it, sharing the same RPM of 900. This ends up giving the weapons the fastest times to kill among the PDWs. Obviously, if you want to always come out on top by sheer volume of fire, the CZ3A1 is the better choice of the three. The JS2 technically has the best overall hipfire performance of any full auto, owing to its bullpup configuration resulting in a tighter hip cone. In very close ranges, it's technically matched by the P90 for hipfire, but because it fires a stronger round, it has about 15 meters of extra 3-hit kill range, and about 10 meters of extra range for 4-hit kills, meaning that if you wanted to hipfire very frequently, and even for somewhat middling ranges, the JS2 is the better option. Even with the faster RPM, the CZ doesn't have quite the level of a statistical strength for hipfire, and the SR2 falls a little behind even that. This is due to comparatively worse hipfire accuracy, as they are not bullpups. However, they'll still perform better than most PDWs just due to the sheer volume of fire, and far better than any other non-PDW. It, however, is weaker compared to the other two options here by the measurement of deploy time, the JS2 having a conventionally speedy deploy time, the SR2 being a little sluggish, and the CZ entering clunky territory. Juggling your equipment or jumping and vaulting around with the CZ can potentially put you at a greater disadvantage than usual. RPM is not the only strength of the CZ, it also has a fairly strong tactical reload, meaning that you benefit from a fairly strong uptime as long as you don't let its blazing fast RPM completely empty your magazine. The JS2 ends up being fairly mediocre for both reload times by comparison, and the SR2 comes with a painfully slow empty reload in particular. They all have the same capacities, so the resulting ammo reliability is directly reflected through these reload times, and they are not particularly impressive overall. Despite the SR2's worst-in-class horizontal recoil compared to the other two PDWs, its aimed accuracy will overall be generally better than both the CZ and JS2. It has a tighter stationary accuracy compared to the JS2, better bloom and fade stats compared to the CZ, and a lower upward recoil and first shot recoil compared to both. So if you want your bullet hose PDW to have better functionality at middle ranges, the SR2 is going to generally be the better bet. The only exception here is that, again, because it's a bullpup configuration, the JS2 has an effectively tighter moving aimed spread than either, and having a better stationary accuracy compared to the CZ is not really impressive, seeing as that aspect is its greatest weakness. And unfortunately, taking advantage of that generally better capacity on the SR2 might require some careful leading of your targets, as it has the worst non-suppressed velocity of any full auto in BF4. The JS2 similarly struggles in this department. Only the CZ has at least a medium mediocre bullet velocity for PDWs. Otherwise, the bullet hoses have fairly mundane stats in other areas. Being that these weapons have troubling recoil, I suggest an alternative barrel to my default builds. For the SR2 and CZ, I suggest a compensator. And if you find yourself fighting at middle ranges, to fire short bursts to minimize the negative impact you will get from the greater bloom, or even take advantage of the CZ's burst mode. The JS2 is a little more open-ended. Sticking with a heavy barrel can actually improve its hipfire and moving ADS accuracy, and seeing as that is its main feature, you might want to just stick with that. However, the steep upwards recoil might lead you to instead to use a muzzle brake to give it a more evened out set of recoil and bloom stats if you do plan on stopping and firing with it every once in a while. As for tactical usage, to get the most out of the SR2 and CZ's ammo reliability, you want to make sure to reload before empty. While with the JS2 you can generally get away with running it until dry a little more, as the penalty for loading it empty is not proportionally heavy. In general, you also want to be in the front lines pushing directly into an objective, and preferably in close quarters. These weapons are obviously going to function better in smaller close quarters maps overall. However, you can bring them out into larger maps for fights on closer ranged areas on capture points. And this becomes much easier if you bring along a sidearm that can handle longer range. For all three, I generally suggest the 44 Magnum, largely because it can work both at longer ranges while also doing a decent job of acting as an emergency secondary, something the mediocre to poor ammo reliability of these PDWs makes necessary. If, however, you opt to select a launcher that enables rocket sniping, like the SRA, a better choice might be the Compact 45, as it has a maximally fast draw and a set of generally strong stats, where its only main weakness is its slower velocity, something that won't matter much assuming you are switching to it for one of these low muzzle velocity PDWs. The next set of PDWs play out like laser beams of death, striking the balance between close range domination with middle range capability, all while being extremely intuitive and easy to use. The P90 and MP7 achieve this by utilizing intermediate cartridges, which deal less damage per shot but are able to be fired at higher than average velocities and at high cyclic rates while maintaining middling controllability and decently good precision. However, much like the bullet hoses, the first and most major strength of these two PDWs share is their high cyclic rate, with the MP7 coming in at second place. This generally gives them similarly effective hipfire performance to the bullet hoses, with the P90 matching the JS2, being that it's also in what is effectively a bullpup configuration with the same RPM. A main differentiating factor for the intermediate PDWs compared to the bullet hoses, however, is that they have noticeably stronger ammo reliability, with the P90 having a stronger magazine size of 50 plus 1 rounds, and the MP7 having a sprightly set of reload times. In particular, even the empty reload is quick, making ammo management a breeze, as you can generally let the gun reach empty most of the time without deadly downtime as long as you manage to empty the weapon in the right circumstance. That said, even if the P90's overall ammo reliability is strong, keep in mind that both of its reloads can be painfully slow, though reloading too frequently is similarly a greater threat to uptime than simply letting the gun run dry, and this is largely one of its bigger weaknesses. Some minor perks of the guns is that despite being high rate of fire bullet hoses, is their fast bullet velocity, precision-oriented recoil stats, and middling bloom stats allow them to remain generally accurate. Their low horizontal recoil and low multipliers, combined with the middling bloom, make them consistently decent for longer ranges than average for PDWs. The biggest weakness that's shared between both, however, is their noticeably weak damage, especially over range and against targets with the defensive field upgrade. Out to 15 meters, 3 unarmored chest shots in a row will result in a kill. Out to 31 meters, 4 hits anywhere to the body results in a kill. Out to 45 meters, 5 hits anywhere to the body results in a kill. Out to 16 meters, a headshot plus a shot anywhere results in a kill. This extends to 18 meters if the other shot is an unarmored chest shot, and extends to 40 meters if both shots are headshots. For as long as the projectile is still flying, 3 headshots or 6 body shots will result in a kill. Most of the other stats for these two PDWs are not particularly strong or weak. Where the default build has issues with the standard bullet hoses, it holds up excellently for these two PDWs. I advise firing until dry instead of constantly reloading. As for typical ranged engagements, these can't quite reach out like the precision or heavy hitting PDWs, but work decently better at middle ranges compared to the bullet hoses or even workhorse PDWs. Long bursts work fine, and hip firing in close range like a bullet hose is very effective. Further, aiming for the head tends to be more lucrative than usual regardless of range. These PDWs are for the most part generalists. They're fairly good at playing aggressively, though they are capable of taking advantage of a good flank. Using them defensively is generally a waste, and there are better options for that playstyle. As for a sidearm pairing, the P90 goes well with the QSZ-92 or the P90's brother pistol, the FN57. The laser-like semi-autos work well as fast finishers, and assuming you follow my recommendation of suppressing the QSZ, it can perform as a solid stealth utility if you are willing to sacrifice the few statistical strengths that the FN57 has for more aggressive play. They do have generally fast deploy times that can help make up for the P90's longer reload times. The MP7 can also go with those options, assuming you have a launcher that can rocket snipe, but if you don't, it gains a bit more from a 44 Magnum. The MP7 is a little weaker at longer range compared to the P90, so something that can help cover for that will have a greater impact on your loadout's performance, while still maintaining a fast deploy time. Last but not least, I want to go over the two integrally suppressed PDWs, which are unique in that they benefit from having effectively both a heavy barrel and suppressor at the same time. This makes them technically the most initially precise suppressed primary full auto weapons the engineer can equip, despite being PDWs, due to having a tight initial spread. It's also notable that the AS Val is oftentimes cited as the best PDW in BF4, often seen as competing with the MPX for that top spot. They share a unique damage model that deals more damage than other PDWs at both very close range and longer range. However, the effect on its hits to kill on target at full health will only have an effect at longer ranges, and only with unarmored chest shots and headshots. As a result, their hits over range is exactly the same, except if you get 2 headshots at any range the bullets are still flying, you get a kill, not just up to 48 meters. And as long as the bullet is still flying, you can get a kill with 4 unarmored chest shots, both things the standard damage model PDWs don't provide. The effect on the PDW's performance is mostly minor, as their slow bullet velocity and still fundamentally PDW level accuracy make such long shots rare. But still, it's a nice perk. If you want to have any hope of actually taking advantage of that longer range damage buff, the Groza 4 is the better choice. With its low horizontal recoil and first shot multiplier, you'll have the best chance to actually land those very long-ranged hits, as the AS Val's recoil, on the other hand, is mediocre at best. This also applies to the bloom and fade stats. The AS Val loses its accuracy quickly and regains it slowly, while the Groza 4 has a reasonable set of bloom and fade stats that combine with a lower recoil to make the weapon generally fairly precise. Of course, the AS Val isn't intended for a longer ranged role in the first place. It instead has a clear focus on close range damage output with its high RPM, matching many of the bullet hoses. This enables you to aggressively push into the enemy, all while benefiting from a lower spread and not showing up on the map when you fire. The Groza 4, on the other hand, can actually count this as a weakness, having a damage output that matches the precision PDWs, making it lose to most face-to-face situations. However, if you find yourself within hipfire range, the Groza 4 somewhat makes up for this weakness by having an excellent overall hipfire performance because of its bullpup design, which comes with an improved hipfire accuracy and better spread while aimed and on the move. The AS Val isn't necessarily weak on this front. It's still a high cyclic rate PDW, but it only really beats the slower firing PDWs and otherwise matches the average performance. The rest of the PDW options beat it either because of an RPM advantage or tighter hipfire cone. One other strength of the AS Val is its fast reload speeds. In both tactical and empty, the AS Val won't keep you out of the fight for very long, which is useful in particular as both PDWs also have a smaller magazine and resulting kill capacity. So even with those fast reloads, it ranks still fairly low on this metric. Unfortunately, the Groza 4 has the overall slowest set of reload times for any PDW, and combined with that small magazine gives it the worst overall ammo reliability for any fully automatic primary in the game. This is the Groza 4's greatest weakness. The combination of heavy barrel and suppressor that these PDWs bring is largely why I don't suggest suppressing any of the other PDWs. These two integrally suppressed weapons render such a tactic somewhat pointless, as suppressing any of the previous PDWs means you are stuck with the PDW's initial spread and slow bullet velocity, but without any recoil reduction. That said, the slower bullet velocity is really the main limiter of range for these two PDWs. At 300 meters per second, it is actually middle of the road for suppressed PDWs, but since you can't remove the suppressor, comparing the velocity to the full velocities of other PDWs is about as fair, and with that comparison, it comes out as a major weakness. Regardless, the AS Val and Groza 4 are by far going to be superior to any of the other PDWs with a suppressor, even with their various weaknesses. The rest of the stats of the integrally suppressed PDWs are not significantly weak or strong. You can't select a barrel for either of these PDWs. However, you can select the rest, and in such a case, my default PDW build suits these two guns fine. The only note I might make is with grip selection. The improved initial spread might make you want to hone in the accuracy a bit to focus on stationary firing instead of hipfire or ADS strafing. If you do take this road, an angled/folding grip works well with the AS Val to tame its harsh initial kick, and the stubby/potato makes some sense for the Groza 4 to minimize its spread stats for longer ranged shots. Otherwise though, I still generally think the default ergo/vertical grip makes the most sense. Their role overall is clear because they are both suppressed options. A flanking playstyle makes sense, with the Groza 4 focusing more on keeping your distance to achieve flanks, and the AS Val leaning more into handling frontline combat when it's necessary to break through the enemy lines, giving it a sort of hybrid role. This makes them generally excellent for slaying the enemy team, so your team can capture points safely. In general, I'd suggest center of mass for the AS Val and going for headshots with the Groza 4. Long bursts are fine with the Groza 4 for long range, but if you want to have a real shot at hitting your target with the AS Val, shorter bursts are the way to go. I generally suggest reloading the AS Val frequently, as it has a small magazine and its tactical reload is very quick. The punishment for an empty is not exactly harsh, but it's a little less statistically strong. As for the Groza 4, when to reload is a tough question, as you can really lose regardless. I generally reload a little more frequently if you are closer to enemy forces, if only because of its small magazine. But if you are keeping your distance like you should be, letting it run dry at least helps prevent you from wasting ammo. Just stick close to cover and expect to be rudely interrupted with its long reload animation sometimes when firing on a target. As for sidearm pairing, the AS Val benefits from a longer ranged option. The 44 Magnum is probably a safe choice since it will also have a faster deploy time than the Mare's Leg. Having the 44 Magnum can help make up for the AS Val's small magazine, as well as its lack of longer ranged capabilities. Since the Groza 4's ammo reliability is so terrible, however, I'd not look any farther than a pistol with a maximally fast draw and preferably stronger than average ammo reliability, and a decent rate of fire that works well with the suppressor so you can maintain loadout cohesion. The MP443 makes sense to me in particular, but you could also go with the QSZ92. When it comes to the gadgets and field upgrades to pair with the PDWs, I find that it mostly depends on the specific launcher you pick more so than which PDW you are using. So for this section, I'm going to frame things sort of in the inverse. What should you pair with which launcher? I did partially cover this in the first PDW episode, but I want to go into greater depth and be comprehensive here. The Law is generally a good fit for most PDWs in infantry-only or infantry-focused maps due to its strong one-hit kill radius and brisk reload speed. It makes an excellent launcher for a frontline objective-pushing class in such a situation. If you choose to use it with your PDW, select the offensive field upgrade so you can more quickly push, and the EOD bot as your second gadget for sneaky MCOM arming, reconnaissance, or infantry kills. Any PDW works with this setup, as the PDWs are generally always solid picks for smaller infantry maps. The SMA is generally a better option when you intend to ride in vehicles in large vehicle heavy maps, as it can be fired from passenger seats and has a fast velocity, but otherwise it doesn't have many other strengths. This is generally not a situation you want to have any of the PDWs except for the CBJ-MS and PP2000 because of their large magazines, bullet velocity, and accuracy, which can make landing hits from a moving vehicle generally easier. You want to have the repair tool to repair the vehicle you are riding in and mechanic field upgrade, as pretty much all 4 upgrades that come with it synergize well for that context. A minor note, the SMA also makes decent sense if the map you are playing on only has IFVs and no MBTs if you are trying to maximize damage per hit, as the RPG-7 does more damage, but its more sluggish projectile makes it worse than the SMA for dealing with the faster moving armored vehicles. The RPG-7 and SRA are both generally excellent choices in vehicle maps as a focused anti-tank engineer. Much like the SMA, the RPG-7 can also be fired while riding in a vehicle, so driving around an MBT in a Jeep to face its rear to instantly switch to the passenger seat to fire your RPG-7 is a viable tactic. The RPG-7 is going to be the favorite choice if you already have a Mare's Leg or 44 Magnum for longer ranges. The RPG-7 also makes decent sense paired with the more precise PDWs like the PP2000, CBJ-MS, UMP9, or Groza 4, as those have a lesser need for a launcher that helps snipe infantry. The SRA is the best general-purpose launcher when paired with PDWs. The SRA can rocket snipe infantry and basically all vehicles to roughly equal effect due to its wire-guided nature, fastest in class reload, decent damage against vehicles, and laser designation compatibility. Any PDW, except maybe for the previously mentioned precision PDWs, would work well with the SRA. For both the RPG-7 and SRA, I suggest the M2 slams an anti-tank field upgrade. The slams can be stuck to an unaware tank and then detonated with your launcher or a grenade to deal a significant amount of damage before the tank can even react, and the anti-tank field upgrade is pretty much built for this style of play, as they can one-shot a main battle tank, but they're less consistent as they won't always detonate if the targeted vehicle moves in the wrong direction, since they can't be stuck to the vehicle, meaning potentially no damage will be dealt at all if you die before shooting a launcher to detonate the mines. Further, the undetonated mines could pose a risk to friendly vehicles, while a slam stuck to an enemy tank doesn't. The Javelin is generally not a launcher I suggest you use, especially paired with a PDW, because it requires you to maintain a lock for most of its flight to its target. Most of the time it's just going to result in the vehicle in question killing you long before, since its locking mechanism immediately gives away your firing position and makes you very visible. It's an okay choice if you only use it when a main battle tank is already preoccupied with a friendly vehicle or fellow anti-tank engineer, or if you suspect that you're going to have a lot of targets lased for you ahead of time, since the Javelin has a much longer range for locking onto lased targets, all the way up to 500 meters. In any case, this would mean you are going to be better off playing defensively, however, and from elevated positions, or even while parachuting. These are all situations where PDWs won't be of much use. Consider one of the longer-ranged all-class primaries instead. The anti-air launchers, the Stinger and Igla, are somewhat limited in terms of usefulness. The Igla requires you to maintain a lock for the entirety of its flight to its target, but its rocket moves significantly faster than the Stinger, and is generally the better choice if you are playing a dedicated anti-air class. The Stinger is a fire-and-forget launcher, and can be mostly useful to quickly force aircraft to flee, rather than get any actual kills, though you might get lucky against helicopters on occasion, especially against low-skill pilots using the transportation helicopters. It's also fairly effective at quickly taking out MAVs. Overall, they are going to be most effective equipped with the AA mine, as you'll be able to force an air vehicle to drop their countermeasure with one gadget and then finish them off with the other. Unfortunately, anti-air launchers aren't particularly effective otherwise. Also keep in mind, the AA mine oftentimes doesn't even get its target time to react with countermeasures. It is generally a dominant anti-air tool. If you find yourself playing a dedicated anti-air build, the anti-tank field upgrade at the very least makes sense for the additional ammo for your launcher and explosive resistance. Though unfortunately the AA mine is not affected by the mine upgrades. The PP2000 and CBJ-MS makes sense when paired with these launchers, as their stats better enable you to shoot out helicopter pilots. builds. If the air vehicles are of secondary concern and your launcher is only there for deterrence, pretty much any of the other field upgrades can work, depending on the rest of your build. There's also a special tactic you can take with launchers that require consistent locks. That is specifically the Igla and Javelin launchers. You are able to actually launch a rocket while locked to one target, and then switch to a new one while the rocket is still mid-flight. The reason you would want to do this is that it forces one target to drop its countermeasures, and then, additionally, allows you to immediately maneuver the rocket at its top speed towards another, giving that target no time to react and deploy its own countermeasures, almost assuring you're going to get a hit. This can be difficult to pull off, but it's generally going to be more effective when there is a low value target that you can lock to baseboard into your intended target. With the Javelin, you can also target stationary tow launchers and then switch to an armored vehicle. If you are playing a dedicated stealth build with one of the integrally suppressed PDWs, the AS Val and BF4, it might make sense to equip both sets of mines instead of a launcher at all, as a suppressed weaponry should allow you to reach deeper into enemy territory. Obviously, if you try this playstyle, you will want the Shadow Field upgrade to minimize how often you appear on the map. That said, this build's success is heavily dependent on holding and staying in the enemy's home capture points, meaning your team likely needs a certain level of competency for this to even be a realistic tactic. And in wide open maps, this is not a viable tactic regardless. Be sure to only try this in vehicle maps with plenty of cover, like Dawnbreaker and Siege of Shanghai. Place the mines in entrances to capture points your friendly vehicles won't use for obvious reasons. When it comes to grenades, you generally don't want to focus too much on lethal grenades if you're using a PDW. If you are playing in a smaller infantry map, the PDWs are more likely to benefit from the more spammable flashbangs because of your PDW's mobility, allowing you to rush dazzled opponents. And in large open maps, the smoke grenades have more utility and anti-tank contacts, reducing the range of your engagements to suit the PDW more, and pushing into objectives. And that covers the PDWs. The PDWs in BF4 are numerous and varied, and can suit all sorts of playstyles, even outside the typical close-range combat that they are most commonly associated with. But they are all more effective than any other full auto option for hipfire. They offer the Engineer class an exclusive selection of weapons that can keep you very effective on the front lines. If you want to be informed of future video releases by me, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell for notifications. Also consider liking the video if you enjoyed it. If there is something I missed, or you think I got wrong, or if you just want to contribute to discussion, please feel free to comment as well.